Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles just recently celebrated its 20th anniversary as it launched all the way back in 2003 back in Japan. Despite getting many sequels both on the Wii and the original DS in the following years, there really hasn't been a brand new console release since pretty much 2009's Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles: The Crystal Bearers back on the Wii. And basically the producer for the franchise, Akitoshi Kawazu, is fully aware of this situation. In their most recent anniversary post celebrating the 20th anniversary, in their official Final Fantasy website, which I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below, and a huge shout out to Nintendo Life for providing a translation, Kawazu laments his inability to bring any sort of new title to eager fans, stating that he just can't find the time to do it all. Nevertheless, for players to continue to trust that a new chapter will arrive. So essentially he teases that something is going to eventually happen, but as of right now, it's something that is not a main priority. We get to see some of his quotes, and once again, the official FinalFantasy.com topics page, link in the description below for that, where you see the special features celebrating the 20th anniversary of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. Remember, the recent re-release just dropped, I believe, late last year on PlayStation, maybe Xbox, certainly the Nintendo Switch, and on PC, and people were not necessarily too thrilled with the way that package ended up dropping. The online was not necessarily great. The port was not really all that awesome. Visuals certainly didn't really live up to what people would have hoped to be reworked as a remaster or a remake, and it just simply kind of fell by the wayside, most likely due to the fact that people expected a little bit more. Certainly connectivity with other players would have gone a long way, and that simply just didn't work all that well. In their official post, they mentioned that when the game was released for the Nintendo GameCube over 20 years ago, its standout features was the ability to use the Game Boy Advance as a controller to play with up to 3 different players. I'm sure many remember chatting with friends and family as you solved puzzles, fought enemies, and exchange useful information. To celebrate the 20th anniversary of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, they would like to share a message from the producer Akitoshi Kawazu and an illustration from the series art director Toshiyuki Itakahana. They mentioned that in the 20th anniversary of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, personally, I feel I regret for most not being able to satisfy the fans who have been holding out hope for an all-new Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles game. While there is so much I would like to do, I just can't find the time to do it all. I know that the characters deserve to shine again, and I've been unable to provide them with another adventure. They're eager to set out and discover the true meaning of the crystal's blessings, and much like those of us who were cooped up at home for the past few years, they only gaze upon the skies above in their respective towns day after day. But new trials do await them. Once from they will grow stronger. Please trust that one day a brand new chapter will be added to their adventure. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles producer Akitoshi Kawazu. Now this is really interesting because essentially he is confirming that something will happen. It is inevitable. However, it is not something that A, they're willing to talk about right now, and B, is most likely not in production as of this point in time, or at the very least, I don't get that perception that this is something that they are doing. Maybe certainly they are brainstorming. Certainly when you see a company like Square Enix, Capcom, Koei Tecmo, Bandai Namco, and even Nintendo to some degree, whenever they port the old version of a game into modern consoles, usually it's to test out the waters. It is usually to test out to see what the feedback is on that game. Does that franchise still reserve some love from the fandom? Would sales accommodate X amount of budget? All those kind of things. And usually fan feedback is the most important thing. And certainly Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, the remake and the remaster on a Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, once again, maybe Xbox, I don't quite remember, but certainly on PC, that game got a lot of feedback, but certainly not in the right way. So it might have rubbed the players the wrong way at the end of the day that it didn't really live up to the expectations of what a lot of players would have hoped for a modern console game. But again, it was just trying to do what the original did back in the day in modern consoles, and it's just players expect a little bit more nowadays, and it is not that much of a surprise that it received negative opinions. At the same time, there were a couple of patches that addressed some issues, but like many games, patches can only do so much if the main core issues are not fully addressed, or maybe they just simply weren't even considered as part of the development process. With all of that said, however, it does seem to be like a new entry could potentially be happening based on the series producer. It's just not something that is a high priority, at the very least for Square Enix, or maybe him alone, since there's other projects that Square Enix is constantly, specifically with the Final Fantasy moniker, constantly working on. We do have another quote as well from the art director Toshiyuki Itahana, where he mentions that he's thrilled to have honor of drawing an illustration for the 20th anniversary of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. Many of these characters I hadn't drawn in so long that I couldn't help but feel like I was reuniting with old friends that I hadn't seen forever. And that is pretty much the quote that he shared there, and certainly you guys should be able to see that art there again, which looks pretty dang cool. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Remastered Edition is a beautiful rendered version of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. Is currently available. It features new elements including online multiplayer mode and crossplay, which allows players to transcend the boundaries of individual platforms and empowers them to explore an expansive world with friends. And even in that game's description, it does seem to miss the point where, you know, some of the features just simply didn't necessarily work all that well. A lot of people were complaining about the characters just not working as properly. Maybe I think there were some performance issues as well, especially on the Switch. Not a lot of things nice to say regarding that full-on remaster version, which realistically speaking, when it comes to Square Enix, the threshold, let's call it, or that window, that prism of like, what are they actually going to spend money on to remaster? Is everything going to have a Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles or a Chrono Cross level of budget where, you know, they are just doing the bare minimum to be able to get these games out on the console? Or are we looking here at some like Final Fantasy VII remake type territory where they're just making things completely onto another level? Or even Star Ocean's Second Story R, which is, you know, yeah, sure, it's not going to look like Final Fantasy VII Remake or any of those games in that trilogy, but boy, oh boy, does that HD 2D look really cool on that game. And a lot of people are hoping for things like that to kind of happen for games like this from the bygone era. So certainly we'll have to stay tuned for this brand new entry, hopefully revealed in current gen consoles. If you're brand new to my channel though, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.